Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, March 21st meeting, of the Budget and Finance Committee. Our esteemed colleague, Chair Lebo, is remoting in, so I've stepped into the role here tonight, but so we can keep ourselves moving forward. I'm looking for an adoption of the agenda. So move. Second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It is approved unanimously. At this point, I'd love to open up for public comment. Matt, do we have any public in the participants that might be interested in a public comment tonight?
No, we do not have any attendees.
Okay, and don't see anyone in the room that is interested as well. So that will close our public comment for the evening. And now I'm looking forward to the director's report. I will hand it off to the director.
So, thank you.
It's short, isn't it?
The director's report, actually this month, I spent my time focusing on a little later in the agenda to get, some in-depth financial information. And so next month, we will be going over the monthly dashboards for January, February, and March in April. So
Fantastic.
just to give you an update on that, but something had to give here.
Looking forward to the next director's report and its, plethora of dashboards, if we will. And so I think that moves us on to new business. So that's item 5. And so we've got 3 items under new business that will be brought to us by our director: the end of biennium forecast, the early estimate for the 6-year forecast, and then we will have a discussion around funding for the 40th Place Roundabout. So would you like to lead us in the biennium forecast?
I would definitely like to go ahead and lead that conversation. I'm buying the clerk just a minute of time to pull up the presentation. Just a quick PowerPoint, and then we will probably have him pull up after we go over. It's basically just to give a quick overview, the end of biennium forecast, and that's going to walk into the 6-year financial. So the presentation kind of goes from one and walks naturally into the other for that conversation. So the city financials, so walking into the next slide, which is also, you have the second behind the 6-year forecast, you have the projected 2024 ending fund balance. So this should be a very familiar schedule, as this is in the budget, but this has now been updated. So you have the actual 2023 numbers that are included, plus, and if I will just save you all time to do the math, because the next slide is going to show the operating, and that's been given to you. So I'll just save you from doing the math as I walk through this, but I wanted to get through this slide first. So this is the 2023 actuals plus the 2024 estimated. And I want to make very clear that we are stating that this is a very early estimate. And that's both on the revenue and the expenditure side, which provides a very early projected ending fund balance for 2024. And then typically we state the minimum fund. So there's 4 funds that we need to hit the target of our 16%. And each one of those funds is doing so at this time. So if we walk to the next slide, this is where we now, the exact same information, but the column on the right has been added, the projected revenue to expenditure on the operating side. And what operating means is just simply taking the fund balances out of the equation and just having the revenue to the expenditures for the biennium and what that looks like. And that is an overview for every single fund that the city currently has. So the general, the street, and all the way down. And I think I'm going to, would you guys like me to continue walking through? I think we probably should just continue to walk through, and if there's questions.
I did want to just note, so I kind of did the napkin math, but looking at the projected revenue, so we do have some funds that are projecting to have more and some funds that are projecting to have less. So it looks like of the funds that are coming in under, it's somewhere around 3.5. Is this a way that we can think about it, or is that not how this is working?
That's a very general statement, and each fund kind of stands on its own. So there's different reasons for each fund.
Mhm.
So I want to be careful making a blanket statement like that for all of the funds.
Okay,
So are you specifically asking about the general fund?
no, I'm just saying kind of if I look at taking up all the minuses and adding them and all the pluses and adding them, is that a good way of seeing where we're at as far as?
I would say kind of.
Okay.
One up there that I think you'll notice is the ARPA fund. It shows it'll be 1,005,000 below.
But
Those were dollars that you allocated last year from one-time funds, so I'd be, like
some aren't
the
relevant.
director said, adding those together would kind of tell an incorrect story of where things are coming.
And like, that's a great example, the ARPA funds, that is the intention, is those funds are completely allocated. And no more revenue will be coming into those funds, and they need to be allocated and committed by the end of this year, or excuse me, committed by the end of this year. So that they can be fully expended by 2026.
Okay. Generally speaking, it looked like we had in the positive, that the fund balances are generally more positive than negative, so we're ahead of where we estimated.
I would,
Is that hard to say?
That far right side is revenues to expenditures, so,
Okay.
but that's what, like for the general fund, expenditures are exceeding revenues. So
Yeah.
that's- But if you look 2 columns over, you see the fund balance, you see beginning fund balance and ending fund balance, so you still see that they're meeting projection, you know, that 16% minimum.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the 16% minimum notes on there, that we meet all those.
Could you just speak to the surface water utility numbers?
specifically just asking,
Why the projected revenue to expenditures operating are negative?
so on that fund specifically, that fund has been, we did do a couple of significant increases on that fund, but right now at this time, we have to project that we will probably expend higher on that fund. The actual way, where we might end up, like the professional services for some of the contracts, we have to estimate really high at this point to be safe. But could that fund come in a little bit better because of, yes, but we have to estimate high because this one is so early. And
Yeah, okay. I was surprised because I knew we had raised the rates to try to cover our estimated expenditures, so that's why this took me by surprise.
but on that fund specifically, there has been a lot of additional requirements that the city has had to increase costs on because of the NPDES
Yes.
permits, sorry. So that permit and some of the other stormwater requirements that are being driven by Department of Ecology that the city is tied to.
So I thought most of the stormwater stuff we had a grant for. Is that not true, that that's not covering those costs? Whereas am I
The
completely
ongoing,
mistaken?
the ongoing inspections and now those come out. There are no grant funds for those.
Okay.
That is ongoing operational
Ongoing
costs.
operational costs, yeah, it is operations as opposed to the other work. Okay, so that, I just flagged that as a concern.
Any other questions? Councilmember Furtani.
Thank you. And I'm gonna go way back to basics, so okay, just so that this is clear to me. If we label the actual beginning fund balance January 1st as column A, and we label the early estimated projected ending fund balance as column B. Literally, that final column over there is B minus A.
No,
Oh.
no, it's actually, so if we took, the fund description is A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Okay.
And just straight across, so that, is everybody following that? Okay, so you would be taking C minus D. So your revenue, the money coming in within this biennium, that is your, what is defined as what we kind of call operating revenue. So that's why we're using the word operating. It's coming in within this 2 years. And then the expenditures in that biennium number are what's going out within these 2 years. And then the operating is just taking those 2 columns, money coming in versus money going out. And if you look at column B, C, D, E, and then go to E, that less the 1.185, that's, you will see that you started at 7.8, and now you're down to 6.694.
That would explain the date. Thank you very much.
So, yeah,
One more question.
absolutely.
So the Public Works Trust Fund repayment, we're short, 15,000 for that, which isn't a lot. But is that something that we repay out of the general fund?
No,
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 okay.
no.
Sewer fund, okay,
That-
that's sewer fund.
That is a sewer fund, and actually, that fund, we're getting towards the end of that payment, so we're gonna wanna see some of that.
Okay, so that's another place where we raised rates, but, it's not is it not covering our operating costs then?
No,
By a little bit, or am I misunderstanding the significance of that?
that there are some other things going into that fund, and that is not one that I'm concerned about.
Okay.
Cause that's
It's
just
a
a
small
straight
amount.
debt payment that is
Okay,
transferred and then paid out of that
Oh,
fund.
okay.
It's a straight debt.
that's
payment.
all I need to know.
And
Yes,
if there's a
okay.
balance and we start to
Okay.
dwindle that fund balance down,
Uh-huh,
because we're getting towards the end
I
of
get it.
that,
okay,
then that actually is a good thing. We
Right.
don't wanna keep.
right, money there, right, got it, thank you.
Yeah.
We transfer in and take them out.
And I do wanna take one more second to remind that there are categories to. There's the general fund, and we speak of the general fund, but there's a couple of other sub-funds within the general fund. Then there's we call them special purpose funds. And those are what we define as like the 100 funds, which would be like your street fund and your transportation benefit district fund. So these funds, the reason that I'm taking a minute to explain this, and then the third category would be your enterprise funds. And those funds are, the best way to explain those are like your sewer capital, your utility, surface water utility, and your surface water utility capital. Those are like little businesses that the rates need to they need to stand on their own 2 feet. So the rate has to support all of the expenditures going out on those 2 funds. So my point in taking a minute to explain all of that is there's different sets of rules that we're tied to from the state auditor on different funds. So when we look at every fund the city has as a whole and start to use generalizations, we need to be careful doing that as a reminder. Just,
Maybe worth having a refresher on that, at a later date.
yeah, I
We did get that.
I admit, until we started having this conversation, I'm like, that is probably something we need to have a little reminder on, and there is a fantastic cheat sheet on your fund structure, which is in the original budget. Hold on, I'm gonna find the page. Because it's one of my favorite charts that I refer to all the time. And it is on page 16.
So page 16.
Page
of the
16.
adopted budget.
And that's where it's gonna show you the governmental funds, the special revenue funds, the debt service funds, capital funds, enterprise funds. The internal service funds are supported by the other funds, which is like your vehicle and your equipment. And the information technology, those are internal service funds because they're supporting every fund. So that's how they are paid for. And so that is, I didn't think about, taking a minute to re-highlight that, but that is one of my favorite graphics to constantly refer back to.
Thank you. I did see your hand up earlier, Councilmember Furtani. Do you want?
So I finally made it off the starting blocks. Now we gotta catch it up here. 16% figure that you said that is not a target. I guess the question is there a good reason to kind of keep track of how much over or close to that target we are as a trend over several years to see if we're declining in that, for instance?
Yes, I think that, the council has put that as a best practice in place to make sure that we have that, it's defined as your safety net. And so, in very simple terms, that's your safety net, and that's, what's in the policy that has been adopted by council. And the math that when we're on a biennial budget, it is 16%. And in our, again, it's within the budget, it states that how you calculate that 16% is based off of the revenue number. So you take that 24, almost 25 million from the general fund, and you divide that by 2 because it's a 2-year budget, and then you times it by 16%. That's the math on that.
And to your point of like how far above we've been, when we put this budget together, it was just a little over 20%. So we're running higher than the 16%, but yeah, we can do quick math to figure out what percent we are right now. But as you'll see in later slides,
There's a
it's
graphic.
going down.
Yeah,
Over time.
there's the graphics coming. But I wanna make sure. No, fire away, if that's,
You can hold this if it's out of place with this broad overview, but what are the estimated claims on the Strategic Opportunity Fund for 2024? In other words, what are we, what did the administration assume we were using that for?
So the 350,000 that was in there is allocated to the parks plan. So you got 250,000 for the lakefront park, and then we had like roughly 100,000 for 5 Acre Woods if we got to that point.
Okay.
Those were the two that we identified.
So that's the money, that money, again, it's money in and then
Money
money
out.
out,
Correct.
yeah, okay. So, is there money there that isn't in from another source that's sitting there for strategic opportunity?
Yes, we got, well, I don't know if does it recite 625
25.
that we got back from RCO, it does recite
Okay.
in there.
Okay,
But in the budget, only 350,000 of that total was allocated by the
Okay.
council, so that's all that can be spent
Okay.
without coming back.
okay. We can talk more about that later. I just need to understand that better. Because I thought we used that to that fund at one point to purchase
We did,
the park.
We
The
did.
lakefront park, we had
That is correct.
$500,000 in there,
Right.
we did expend that, and you rolled the 625 in, we allocated 350 of it, so yeah, it's always been. When we started that fund, it was put a dollar in amount, and so if something came up that was
Right.
unexpected. This go around, it was like, no, we see what's coming and we know these
Right.
dollars are coming.
Right, okay. Okay, thank you. Good enough for now.
Thank you all. I think then we can move on to the next slide, if you're ready.
I am ready.
And Chair Lebo, did you have any questions or comments at this time?
I will, I'll walk through this and then I'll come back.
Thank you. And Councilmember Saunders, I think you're up there as well. Are you okay?
I'm doing great. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Director.
Okay, so then walking into some of the graphics, this is just the general fund. The early estimated budget projection versus the adopted is the currently adopted budget. And then the projected on 23-24 for year end. And we're estimating over what's been adopted in revenues. And kind of the driving forces behind that are just to name a couple: sales tax, the traffic camera fines, there's some grants that are going in and out, the sewer and surface water utility tax. There's police overtime, but that's kind of on both sides. We need to do an amendment. That's in an upcoming, that's reimbursed to support outside entities. And interest is a big one, also assisting on the revenue side. Due to that diversification in our investment strategy from the Budget and Finance Committee. And so then walking into the expenditure side, the adopted budget versus the expenses, what's driving all of that is the significant increase that we didn't see coming for dispatch. The +3 on the police, which that is estimated to be about a $500,000 expenditure. The rifles, and that was due to legislative changes that were a little out of our control. Jail costs are coming in well above what we budgeted, and in fact, we're already at, even with the amendment, 100%. So we're looking at doubling that amount again at a very significant dollar amount. So WCIA costs, Washington City's insurance authority, that is our insurance for everything we do. And their costs have gone through the roof. We've been talking about this often. And actually, even when we got the 2024 invoice in January, it was even over what they estimated to us. So it's just, that is another pain point that just is costing a significant amount of money. Another driving factor is all of the employee COLAs, market adjustments, and it's not just for one, it's for Teamsters, it's for the Guild, it's for MPEs. It's for all, and there's some significant ongoing costs on all of that too. And so are there any questions, or do we want to walk into keep going through?
Questions on the graph?
Okay,
Just here.
Just, yes. We just turn the graph upside down.
so,
It'll be flat. I'll take that.
So walking into, this is the general fund beginning and ending fund balance analysis. This graph should look familiar. I used it from the last conversation during the mid-buy, and then continued to update it to bring it forward. That being said, the beginning is the blue, the ending is the yellow, and then we have down there our 16% with the target that I just explained how we calculate that, and this is the future projection of where we're at.
It basically shows that expenditures exceed revenues every year unless we do. We thought we did this last year, we did. I mean, council increased quite a
Yes.
bit, but just all, Norcom alone ate everything that you did. It was general fund related. Basically what this shows is, and if we go back, 2018 past was kind of where the lines cross. We've pushed this out about a decade, but this shows that ending fund balance line, the yellow line, probably around 29, 30. If nothing changes, that's when you will dip below your 16% ending fund balance at the end of that biennium. So now's the time to start talking about what options we have. So come back Saturday
There's.
over in Kenmore, and we're gonna talk about that
So
too.
historically, we've had this problem, and we've been pushing out, kind of getting one-time funds, and we've been pushing the cliff
Yep.
further and further, but there's no guarantee that we're gonna get enough one-time funds to be able to make up the gap in any given year.
Yeah, one of the
That's the
big
struggle.
most recent big item was like going into COVID. You know, we pulled everything back, we stopped spending, we slashed budget. And then we went into the last biennium and we kept everything very tight and we came back in economically quicker than we anticipated. That was 1.8 million that backfilled the $1.2 million gap that we started last biennium with. So we've had a lot of things that have helped us bring it along, but how long do you want to bet against yourselves?
And I want to say a couple of things before we start getting into questions too. We did the utility tax on the surface water, the stormwater funds. We did the increase for the transportation benefit district of the 0.01% on the sales tax. And then we also did the increase of the $10 vehicle tab, and all of those revenues are flowing. And so I just want to state that all of those are coming into the city but it took a little time on the transportation benefit district to get those implemented. Because when you notice them, then I think the sales tax didn't go into place until April, and the vehicle tabs, I think it was June. And so there was a little bit of a lag there. So therefore we budgeted those on the revenue side extremely cautiously too. Which then we increased a little bit. And there was something else I was to say, but. I know what else I was gonna say, is that, historically, we've allocated, expenditures, and right now it's just so early in the year, that it's a bit more challenging for departments. I'm just gonna put that out there as a generalization to say that we are not going to spend this amount of money, or we are going to spend this amount of money in some areas. Some areas we know. Some areas we just know our requirements. We know that we're gonna have to spend them, and there are other areas that tend to be a little bit on the grayer side, I'm just gonna say. And that is why you're seeing that the ending that we have, that the city has been trying, and all of your departments work very hard to be very fiscally responsible and not spend money that they don't need to spend. And we've really drilled that in and I'm just gonna give a shout out to the departments for that. But then there's challenges that have been brought forth to you, law changes and things that we just kind of have our hands tied on. So that's part of the predicament we're in. And I thought that Chair Lebo was wanting to say something. Okay.
Not yet. Any questions on this graph? This speaks for itself. Yeah.
Because, yeah,
But I will kind of state the conclusion I drew from that graph, which is sometime around 2028, we hit that target line. Sometime around 2030, we go below zero.
We would go below 16%.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
And state minimum that you can go, I think is 5%.
so that's the algae linear trend there. But what I wanted to find out was, you mentioned there was a lot of one-time expenditures, like the rifles, like the +3, for instance. But given how linear that line is, there's something every year that causes us to decline by roughly the same amount every biennium.
Yeah, and this is the structural deficit. It is structural in there. You're gonna see it continue until we do something different, because we can't keep up with inflation. We can't keep up with the costs that are coming in to serve the community in the same way without even doing any added services, and we end up with that decline and the dip towards our target, which we want to stay away from.
I am very sad that the extra revenue sources, which I realize were modest, that we approved last year, haven't filled our revenue to expenditure gaps, though with the footnote that Lindsay made, which is we don't know exactly what we're gonna spend in 2024 yet. But still, it's kind of a bummer. How big the discrepancy is.
When you,
That's a very finance economist right there.
to that point, when you adopted, let's say, just everything that can flow into the general fund, so the utility taxes.
Yeah,
That flow into the general fund, they were about half of the gap we started with last year. We
yeah,
had a $1.2 million gap, this raised $500,000 to $600,000.
Uh-huh.
More common loan costs us
right,
that amount.
right.
And so that's where the tears
I
come in. It's just
understand.
like, you went through, and there
We
was
thought
people
we-
weren't happy about what you were doing.
I know,
But it was a good thing to do. We would be in much worse shape had it not.
that's
occurred.
true, it's less worse.
And then
That's right.
with the investment strategy that Lindsay
Yes.
brought forward, that you
Oh,
approved, that is
true.
helping immensely. This
Oh my
would be a
gosh.
much
If
larger
we hadn't
gap
done that.
if we hadn't done
yeah,
several things.
yes.
But it's just,
We made a lot of the right moves, but the structural deficit gets you every time.
and as we get further into the year, things will keep being fine tuned. We'll keep watching expenditures.
Okay.
I think you've seen in just about everybody in my been here. We're always coming back at the end, spending a significantly less than was
Right,
budgeted now. I'm not sure it's gonna be the same dollar amount this
Yeah.
time because we basically zero based this budget
Right.
and made everybody start over. So it's gonna be even tighter.
right.
And I think we'll be closer to spending what was allocated. But the one thing is, nobody gets to spend over. Without coming to council and having a good, honest discussion about why it is we're going over. And we've done things like that, Norcom and those types of things.
I just wanted to share our grief.
Yeah.
I think that is an ongoing, governmental struggle that is continually brought up at the legislator, the fact that we have the 1%, property tax that would limit that increase is like I think last year it was like 34,000, 33, not even $34,000. And you can see rifles gone, like.
They're just focused on the big cities, that's all they see.
And I
Yeah.
just, there are some significant, revenue challenges that, there are some significant revenue challenges that, continue to play into this, that we kind of have, again, back to the legislator and how things are, that we just don't have another option besides doing some of these other, where we're doing utility taxes
Right.
and,
Got it.
I
I understood the reasons.
Yeah.
It's,
Grieving.
It's good to voice them, but it's definitely to hurt any less, right? Councilor Bertani, I got a thought. Oh, hey
Yeah,
there.
no, sure, if you don't mind, just quickly, not to, it's interesting when I see this, it's like. Every time I see it, my heart kind of sinks, and here we are again, right? And I have to remind myself that of all the good work that previous councils and staff have done to keep pushing that cliff out. And, when I joined the council over almost 13 years ago, it was precipitous. It was right there. We were looking at our toes. And I think that, while this is daunting, the good news is that staff and you all continue to stay informed and think about the future and try to keep that precipice out farther. When I talk to other cities have much closer challenges, and they have better revenue sources than we do, honestly. And so going forward, I try to look at this as positively as we can. It's, drink the Kool-Aid and all that, all the different metaphors and images, but I think that the reality is this community is going to have a very serious conversation about levels of service, what we need to do to make sure that structural deficit, the structural problem is going to continue to be pushed out as far as we can humanly possibly push it out. And I think that there's some good opportunities here for us to have different considerations in that regard. So I'm not looking at this as half empty, I'm looking at this as half full. And the number is still farther out than when years ago we thought we were falling off the cliff. So it is a testament to staff and policymakers that we have gotten to this place where we're not looking at 2 years, we're looking at much farther. So
A lot of hard work. That's one of our first time.
And so, yeah, I guess the question that I have then is, we're alluding to Mayor French's point. Our neighboring cities of Kenmore and Shoreline, Kenmore just hired 3 environmental staff. I think Shoreline is hiring a new environmental position. I guess the question really is, I know this kind of structural deficit hits every city, but it seems to be more severe for us than for our neighboring cities. What's our strategy out of this? Can we emulate anything that Kenmore or Shoreline's doing?
Well, to the shoreline point, they passed a levy many years ago, which, they can go up to 5%. It's basically CPI up to 5%, that they can just increase every year to voters. In fact, just reauthorize that. So that, and they've got a whole bunch of commercial things. They're in much different boat. Kenmore, when I talked to Rob Carlinzi, who's the city manager over there, they're very close to their cliff. I don't know how they're hiring more and more people all the time, and if they're pushing themselves closer to the cliff, I know they hired some people with ARPA dollars, so they're limited term employees unless they can figure out a way to pay for them. I don't know what they're doing over there. But
We'll
I
see.
mean, we're gonna talk Saturday on some other revenue options and things like that coming out of the legislature. So we'll have that discussion with the entire council and as you go into goal setting things Saturday. So I think
We look forward to that.
I'll steal my thunder in there.
Rousing conversation.
Can I add one other thing? When we annexed King County properties and made Lake Forest Park bigger, the city council at that time didn't want commercial properties. And so, the McDonald's and the restaurants down below the cemetery, they chose not to add those. So we have a smaller commercial base as a result of those decisions made for good reasons long ago, but without looking at the financial consequences of it, especially if you're limited to 1%. So.
I was at the time and Councilmember or Chair Lebo, what would you like to add?
A couple questions. So I want to go back. So on the property tax, we're limited to 1%, correct?
Correct.
And so that works out to, I think you said it was about $34,000 in the last, in this biennium.
That is correct. There's some. Yes, I'll leave it at that. There's some other factors that play into that if we're going to that level of detail, but if you're not going that granular, we'll leave it at 34.
I'll leave it at 34 because to generate, I mean, if we had more authority than 1%, right? Even if we're at 10%, it would only be 340,000.
Yeah, even if we'd gotten the 3% that they were running at the legislature, it would have been roughly 100,000.
Yeah.
It's not gonna solve all the world's problems for sure.
Yeah.
No, it's not going to solve all the world's problems. When last year we raised taxes that generated $500,000 over the it was projected to generate $500,000 over the biennium.
Correct.
Yeah, so this discussion about property tax is not going to solve the world's problems.
No, it's not.
Okay. And then if you come back to when we adopted the 23-24 budget, we had a fund balance of about $7.8 million, and we estimated that it was going to drop to about $7 million, right? Page 26.
The adopted budget.
Yeah. What I'm trying to do is put some of this in perspective. So when you go back to what is our projected general fund balance at the end of the year?
6.6.
6.7 million, right?
Yes.
which compares to where we estimated to be when we adopted the budget last year. We projected to be 7,015,000. So, you know, things are going on. We've increased our revenue and we've increased our expenditures. But in terms of where we thought we were going to be over a 2-year period, it's really a difference of about $230,000 or $330,000, right?
Yeah.
So to have a fund reduction of $1.2 million needs to be put in the perspective that we anticipated that we were going to drop by almost $800,000 in this biennium anyway. So the sky is not falling with regard to, we didn't miss the target by that much. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair. As I looked at it, we aren't that far off from where we thought we would be.
Yeah, so I just want to say, yeah, we are going down the slope, but we're not going down, it's not like it's a $1.2 million problem. It's a $300,000 delta from where we thought we were going to be. Right? And the explanation on the ARPA fund, which was, we're just expending funds that we had available to us. And so the question is then how much we anticipated expending? The answer should be probably yes, right?
I mean, yeah, we've expended most of what we anticipated to spend.
Yeah. So the questions then really are about the surface water utility and the surface water capital. Were those what we anticipated to spend, or are those unusual expenditures?
They're on the capital. On the capital side, there have been some unforeseen projects that have shown up. So
Yeah.
no, I'll just say in a general statement, what was originally adopted in the surface water capital fund versus what is currently showing there is a difference. If you give me 1 second, can you?
Sure.
While you're looking, did you have a comment or you want to?
I did, actually. I'm gonna this is gonna be something that's gonna be a problem I'm gonna be all through this year and mid next year. As a reminder, speaking of property tax, sure, Levo, to reminder to the public, we are, out of every dollar that you pay in property taxes, this community received just over 8 cents.
Yeah.
It's really important. I mean, I want to have t-shirts printed with that on it, so that people recognize that while they're complaining about property taxes and issues surrounding those bills, we're only getting just over eight and barely a little bit more than that cents of every dollar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was 10 when I started on capital.
It's decreasing.
Because as the
Yeah.
assessed value increases, the rate decreases.
And other outside
revenue.
challenges come in,
Yeah.
voter approval.
Oh, exactly,
That-
both things,
Yeah,
yes.
so more of the pie,
Right,
not us, gets
Right.
approved additional
Right.
revenue and we don't get
We keep
approved.
losing.
We're
right, and we keep.
We're losing the rate to
incrementally.
hold
Yeah.
ourselves where
Yeah.
we can be.
Okay, sorry,
Functioning
Yes,
as,
thank you.
it's 2 parts to
it
it.
is, you're right.
So complicated.
We found an answer to your surface water capital.
Okay,
So there are 2 projects in there that were not in the adopted budget. One is the 35th Avenue, if you remember.
Oh,
We
our
didn't put
favorite.
that
That
in,
was-
and then we put that back in at the mid-buy. There's also the 28th culvert, which is failing, which is a project for Jeff and Andy. That is in this year-end estimate, because we will have to fix that before the end of the year. And so that is a lot of what is driving, because 28th is estimated, and these are just early estimates, around $130,000 to fix that washed out culvert, and then you've got 400,000 plus up on 35th. So that's part of what's driving those negative numbers that you're seeing.
And I also want to state the early estimated forecast I left on here specifically for the newer, council members. Anything we did on the mid-buy, I took the mid-buy 6-year forecast and kept everything highlighted. So that hopefully you very easily can walk through this, in addition to showing the column of the forecasted in yellow, on this, so that you can easily see kind of how it's working. And of course, if you have any additional questions, those are always welcome. But we just wanted to check on that, so. Is there another budget, Shirley Bo?
Yeah, I just want to come back to the surface water utility and the capital. So spending money out of those is not unusual. It's a question of, did we anticipate spending? I mean, this is over some $1.1 million difference. Did we anticipate spending the $1.1 million?
On the original budget, the answer is no. When the original,
But we're really working from the mid-year revised budget, right?
and that's where one project was entered in. The 35th project was entered in, but the 28th Avenue culvert repair, that project is new and has not technically been amended yet.
But those two together, under 600,000. So I think the question is, what makes up the other 600,000?
Thank you.
Now I'm fully tracking, sorry.
And we might have to get back to you on that one.
I might have to.
Well, the other though is that when we made the mid-year adjustment, we assumed that while there's an expenditure, there's either a revenue that goes with it or a reduction in some other fund balance. So I'm trying to put this in perspective of, yes, we are running a lower number on our fund balance, but is that really unexpected? Just because you spend money doesn't necessarily mean that you've spent more money than you thought you were going to spend.
Yeah, sure. And in the capital funds, it is common for the fund balances to drop like that when you are doing projects.
Right.
That's the explanation. So, I will have to dig into some more detail just to double check before I speak publicly in the group, just to make sure. But I'll circle back with you on that
Okay. Because that's the same question about the transportation capital. You do anticipate spending the money. And so then your balances do go down as you spend the money that you plan to spend. The question is, are you spending more money than you plan to spend? So we got a delta of $714,000. So the question is, was that anticipated? And I only ask that because I haven't had time to cross-check against the budget.
Maybe for Saturday. She's like, no.
Well, what I'm looking for is variances that are unintended.
Yeah.
Because it goes back to, we always intended to spend money. It's just that, are we spending money that we hadn't anticipated spending? And on the general fund, there are some very good reasons for that. And the ARPA is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
We authorize the expenditures.
Thank you, John. Anything else from the other member?
No.
Okay. Shall we move on to our next item?
We're talking about how to spend more money with your raise.
Okay, no, take it back.
I think I can just approach this without being about.
And do we have that for
Yeah,
our
Matt's
digital
put it up.
friends?
Matt's
Okay.
got it up.
Your hand's still up, no, I can,
Oh,
unless you need to say something. You're on mute.
I'd like to say that was the first time today, but probably not. Um, before I forget, would you put the handouts in my mailbox?
Yes,
Thank you.
and this one's gonna go up here any second.
I can do this, but it's not gonna help. you
Yeah,
guys.
it's not gonna help much.
There we go.
Okay, so as you know, we have a roundabout project. I broached this with all of you, but I want to bring it back and have a discussion because kind of a critical point in this project where we've got to do something different or it's going to die on the vine. I've reported to you that we're now at about a $3 million deficit, so don't pay attention to the 2 million because there's kind of two funding sources. So as we had the consultants go back through and do yet another iteration, there's been some increased concrete costs, there's been some increased retaining wall costs, and some increased tree and landscaping costs associated to some of the code updates that we've adopted, which also affect our project. And so we are now looking at roughly a $3.1 million deficit. We explored going after federal dollars for this, but what that does is then federalizes this project, requires us to go through NEPA, and from what we're hearing from TIB and WASDOT is that would add about 2 to 3 years to this project, which we're already struggling due to inflation to keep this thing under wraps. So the next thing that I looked at was there is this is now called the Public Works Board loan. It's Public Works Trust Fund, as everybody knows it. This is an opportunity where we could go out, as we've talked to Transportation Improvement Board staff, they feel that they could go back to their board and get us about $1.1 million of the 3.1 million. And so the numbers that I've run are $2 million, and these are based off of rates from last year. So they run off of the fiscal cycle, not an annual cycle like we do. No, they do run on an annual cycle, sorry. My bad. But this is last year's rate. So in 2023, we could borrow this amount for up to 10 years at 1.72% interest. I'm not sure where their rate's going to fall. We're expecting that the new call for applications will come out May or June of this year. And then we could apply and we would know by August if we were awarded this fund. The source to pay this debt, you'll see the monthly, it would be just over 18,000. On an annual basis, it'd be just under 218,000. This increased TBD budget, this was estimated, this is the 0.01% sales tax and TBD plus the $10 tabs. And so we've looked at the number they're tracking. It may even come in a little bit above 259, but we're not going to use that number. So we could, and this is competitive too, so there's no guarantees. It looks like it's the type of project in the last cycle that did well, kind of in the sweet spot of the dollar amount. But before we go into questions, let me kind of explain why we are not why we are where we are, but kind of the wall that we're up against. So on July 1st of this year, we will basically go and be receiving a notice of non-compliance from TIB. And what we have to do with TIB is submit to them a plan that shows how we plan to move this project forward. If they find that path forward is acceptable, we have until July 1st of 2025 to actually have this project out bidded and moving forward. If we don't move forward, if we don't have a good path forward, the funds could be frozen. And we would have to basically stop the project where it is today or expend our own funds and try and get those reallocated as we move forward. So the 2 million we would apply August. What we've talked to the TIB board staff about is that they would take the request in November to increase the $1.1 million. And so by November, we would have potentially a full funding package to finish this project and begin construction. Andy is moving forward that he will be bidding this, late fall and time for construction next year. And so we've got to keep moving forward. We've got to have a plan in place. Budget Chair Lebo had asked me the question previously, but well, okay, so what if we didn't do the project? 625, no, 650,000 of this is a direct allocation from the legislature. Our delegation got for us 2 years ago, passed through WashDOT. That one's kind of a gray area. They probably want their money back. We haven't spent much of that. The TIB dollars would not be required to be paid back. To date, we've only spent about 400,000 of the 2.5 million. But what they have told us is that there would be some amount of time when we would not be able to apply to TIB for funds in the future going forward. It's kind of our punishment for not spending their dollars and, keeping those in a hopper where other people could use those and move forward. So we're stuck in this place of by July 1st of this year, what I'm looking for tonight is kind of a general head nod. Yes, we don't like the idea, raise these funds, this isn't kind of what we anticipated spending these TBD funds for. But we got a project, it's a good project, it's a safety project, it's a regional project. And it's got pedestrian safety integrated into it. So it's a good project, it's one of the top ones in the state highways study. We would like to see it as staff move forward. But this will take 218,000 of 259,000 we raised for the next 10 years out of this. That doesn't mean that we won't go out and look for other funds to maybe backfill that and pay off that debt. We continue to ask our state delegation to help us fill that, but from other funding sources. So I think they're kind of the TIB and direct allocations. But we're up against this wall. We need to be able to, by July 1st of this year or shortly thereafter, report our plan forward to take this project. Otherwise, we risk having funding suspended. And then the next question is, do we continue to spend city dollars to keep this project moving forward, or do we just shelve it? So.
May I interject something, just
Yes, to add things.
Thank you. To Administrator Quill's point, just a reminder that this was a TIB recommended project. They visited our city and they said, this is a perfect place for a roundabout. And while we're all hesitant, I don't think any one of us as policymakers or former policymakers, we saw the ultimate cost would have said we're going to proceed with this project based upon where we are now. I believe very strongly that both on the question of the goodwill that TIB has expended towards us about recommending this project and funding this project, I believe very strongly that we have to proceed at pace with this. We have to follow through. I get limited funding sources, as Deputy Mayor Bodie will attest to in terms of the federal level. It's very difficult for us to mix our metaphors, so to speak, with NEPA and SEPA, federal environmental regulations versus Washington state regulations. And this is one of those unfortunate things where we have to tie this off in a way that is unfortunate, but I believe that it's necessary. And I think it is a good learning lesson for all of us, without talking about the past, that we have to find ways to fund things without having to mix federal and state funds, because that is very, 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 very difficult and the timelines are long. When we were in Washington, DC last week, there was a considerable amount of discussion about NEPA. NEPA, we had our colleagues back there talking about how long those cycles take to go through the federal environmental policy to receive federal funds. I'll leave it there, but again, to me, this is somewhat painful to talk about the financial side of this. It's very important for us to move forward, I believe, with where we are. Otherwise, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, so to speak, on a couple of fronts.
I mean, I don't disagree. I don't think we want to be in anyone's bad graces if they're willing to give us money. I think that's the wrong place for us to be. So I think we have to figure out a way to make this work so that we don't end up in that position.
So, in the unfortunate position of knowing that we once had a gap of about 900,000. And now it's 3.1 million, and that's over a fairly short period of time. It's the post-pandemic impact. Can we press them to give us more than 1.1 million?
They said that that's really all we're eligible for, and I'd have to go back and talk to them about the details of that, but that was really what they felt
Okay.
they could get through their board. It's actually, I think, a little higher than we started with them. I think we were under 1 million when we started, and
Okay.
we showed them the need and where we are.
Okay, well, and what about the risk that, how comfortable are we that 3.1 million will do it?
I think Andy has had the consultants inflate those numbers through 2026.
Okay,
So
good,
I think we
good.
could be
So we
in
have a
good
cushion
shape.
in
Yeah,
there.
we have a cushion.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest risk is that we don't get it this
Right.
fall. You know, we apply and we do not get it. It was about, from what I saw last year, 70 to 80% of the projects were funded.
Yeah.
I
I
think we
guess-
have a lot of good momentum. You know, I think we could get TIB to speak to it. We could get
Uh-huh.
WASDOT to speak to it. You know, I think we would have a strong application, but it's a competitive process, so there's nothing here.
If we don't, I support this for all the reasons that the mayor and Councilmember Riddle or Co-Chair Riddle has suggested. But if the costs increased or if we didn't get the money we're projecting, the loan and the grant, I would want us to reconsider where we go along the lines of Councilmember Lebo. So to some extent, that gives us a little bit of leverage, I think, which is, this is a project of regional value that we were proceeding ahead with, and through no fault of ours, it's gotten stuck. And if we don't get this dual assistance, you know, we're gonna cough up $260,000 a year over 10 years to make it work.
218.
Oh,
The 260 is what we get, so.
Oh,
so we get a little-
okay,
So,
sorry, 218, I see, I
And
just
so-
was reading the wrong number.
I mean, I would think that the next steps would be to bring this to council as a resolution authorizing the administration to make the application for the grant. And we can put some language in there about getting the money from TIB. I work with Kim to get something so that council's comfortable that, you know, if these things fall apart, we're gonna come back and revisit this. and
Right.
We will not move forward.
Right, it's a dual funding package at this point, I think. Okay, so I'm in support with all those caveats. And more angst from me.
Chair, leave up this.
Yeah, sorry, yes, Chair.
Yeah, so could you lay out and remind me a couple questions? Where had we anticipated spending the $260,000 revenue?
We had not allocated it. This was something that was going to roll into and then be determined at a future time by the council how that was going to be spent.
Okay. When you come to council for this, could you show us the what was the original estimate when we got moved forward with the project, where we are today, and our expenditure by fund source? And so trying to understand how much of this would be city funded versus grant funded versus loan funded.
Yeah, and he's got a spreadsheet that shows all that already. So yeah, we can pull all that together and bring that to council when we present the resolution.
Okay. Because I'm curious to understand, you'd mentioned we're now 3.1 million. Are we looking at a $6 million project?
You have the mirror in there. I can't remember the total dollar amount.
Okay, but when you come to council, you'll have all that.
Yes, it'll all be included.
And then could you include your assumptions about when the estimate was done and what your escalation factors are and how you've estimated in comparison to what you might see in the marketplace?
Yeah, that was all provided by the consultant given to Andy, so. The design consultant.
Because I am concerned, I mean, it is a regional value. I'm concerned about how much the cost has increased and, it's not totally unexpected. But there is a point at which it doesn't make financial sense anymore.
So you got
That's all
some
I need.
research to do and you've got to bring us back some more information and sounds like we'd love to see this at some point in front of council.
Andy's got a spreadsheet. We're not. gonna-
Rely on Andy's
We're not gonna
spreadsheet.
have up to you.
Yes. That,
All right, we have homework and we will put it together. We'll bring it to council.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm not, oh, yes.
One other question. So when you run out the expenditures, it sounds as though we may get to a point, for example, around November 1st, that if we can't get the TIV grant, that we'd be short another $1.1 million, right?
correct.
So it would be useful to understand what would be the anticipated expenditures up to November 1st.
And we already have those as well, so yes.
Okay. Okay. Because looking at what is our sunk cost? Sunk costs are never retrievable.
Exactly. All right. Councilmember Good.
Was there anything in the original package that, is there any differences to what was in the original package to the one now that was, is there any additions?
Yeah, there were several things that came into it. Some of it was council action, due to the walls and the trees. Some of it was due to an underestimate by the original design engineer that did not anticipate some of the requirements that came out of the WashDOT. The asphalt increase kicked in a stormwater vault, which I think Councilmember Lebo will remember was a huge dollar amount, probably a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there were some things that were, the original estimate was poor original estimate. Did not anticipate some things that should have probably been caught.
And if I recall correctly, coordination with the utilities
There's
was also really challenging. Both in design and then how we're planning the construction and phasing that, and that all created some costs as well.
I also think there's a water line that may not have been anticipated in the original. The Lake Forest Park Water District owns, that because of the size, we pay majority of that relocation, so there's.
Let's
it's
not
all the
hire that.
lights under the.
Let's not hire that design consultant ever again.
All right, well, we should shut this down then. Okay. That's the end of our agenda. Any final closing comments before we adjourn for the evening? I'm gonna give Councilmember Saunders and Lebo a chance as well. No? Okay.
See you Saturday.
All right. See you guys
Thank you.
Saturday. Thank you so much, everyone. We're adjourned.
See you Saturday.
11:09.